This is not a story today, but just to talk a little bit about Jesus when he was a very young boy. We know that an angel warned Joseph and Mary not to go back to Nazareth after he was born because Herod was all about getting rid of anybody who could grow up to be a potential king to fight against him. So they didn't. They went on to Egypt instead. And then at some point an angel told them in Egypt it was safe to come back. And they did. And then from there we don't hear anything else about him in the Bible until he's 12 years old and in the temple. So today we're just wondering, what were those years like? And what did Jesus do? And what was he like when he was a young boy? To do one of these stories, we remember that you get to imagine what the face of Jesus and all our other characters would be like. Also, scale doesn't matter. So this Jesus can be the caretaker for Mongo the goat. And finally, we bring every story, every telling to us with a song. Tell us about life way back when. What was it like when it was then? Tell us about family life. Tell us about husband and wife. How to see the moon and the stars when they never stop where they are. Tell us about life way back when. Only God knows both now and then. So Jesus grew up in Nazareth, this little town, dusty town, dry little town, built on a hillside. Not very many people lived here. There was a view to the Sea of Galilee from the top of the hillside here. Everyone had built into the hillside because then they didn't have to build the back wall of their homes. The most important feature was the one daily need that couldn't be ignored, and that was water. And at the base of this mountainside of Nazareth was a well. So one of the things Jesus no doubt had to do every day to help his mother was to go down to the well. And that was probably pretty fun. Down you go, down you go, down you go to the well, and then you get down there and all your friends are gathered and they're all chatting about this and that, and it's fine time. And then you take the pitcher that you brought with you and you dip it down deep, deep, deep into that well and pull it up by a string, and it's full. Unfortunately, it's also very heavy. So the fun part of gathering the water is over, because now you have to carry that heavy pitcher, heavier not only by the water but also by the pitcher it's in, back up to your house here on the hillside where you live. What other things did our young Jesus do every day? Well, he probably was involved in food, our second necessity. Jesus needed to help with food, and the number one item in the diet of this time was bread. So bread was made about every 4 days because it was just so much work. So they'd make sort of round, pita-sized loaves out of grain, and the grain was tough. And the first thing you had to do, the time-consuming thing, was you had to grind the grain until it had turned into a flour that would make bread. They didn't have Walmart to go get their bag of flour from. They had to grind it up themselves. This is what I grind herbs with. So you'd put the grain in here and then smash at it with a rock, probably not with a handle, but smash, 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 until the grain was fine enough to be flour that you could bake into bread. And when you ate it, it wouldn't have grains in it that would crack your teeth. Really a good idea not to crack the teeth of your Mary and Joseph mom and dad. Just good ground rules. What other food did they eat? Well, Jesus probably had to go down and get some fish sometimes in the Sea of Galilee and bring it back to be salted or cooked and stored somehow. We know that Jesus loved his fish because every chance he gets to feed people, He's always pulling out the old fish fry. Jesus is a fish fry foodie. So we know that there was a lot of fish in his diet. What else and how else could he help find food? Well, there was a lot of food to be gathered just from trees. So people could get dates from trees. They're really nutritious. And figs also from trees. There are a lot of different kinds of nuts on trees, and nuts are really nutritious. Also, olives. Olives were pressed into olive oil to be used in the lamps, also to be used in cooking. That 4-day-old bread had to be soaked in something so you could even crack through the crust of it, and you might soak it in olive oil. Some restaurants still do that. They give you bread with olive oil to soak it in. So we've got water, we've got some fish, we've got some fruit. Do we ever have meat? Well, yeah, another part of Jesus' life was probably tending animals. There would have been sheep. Now the reason they had sheep, because another thing that Mary had to do, and Jesus would have helped her, was to turn sheep's wool into yarn, and then yarn into cloth, and then cloth into clothes. That's a long process, but the first thing is to turn the sheep's wool into yarn. That's the first step. And then when our sheep got very, very old and very decrepit and didn't have very good wool anymore, then sheep probably became tasty lamb chops. The other little animal that was probably running around every day with Jesus following it to make sure it didn't run off to the Sea of Galilee for a swim or to go see somebody else's goat friends, was the goat. Now the goat was kept around because goats have goat's milk. And goat's milk is very nutritious. Now, somebody had to milk the goat every day, and maybe that was Jesus too. This little boy did a lot of things, I think, to help his mom. Goat's milk can be turned into yogurt, which stores pretty well and is a popular eating dish in this part of the world. So Jesus is very busy helping his mom, Mary. He's also pretty busy helping his father Joseph. Joseph was a carpenter. That's what we hear. But the Greek word is tekton, which means sort of a man who's very handy, a man who does all kinds of work, including rock work, including any kind of help that anybody needed to keep their house together. Joseph was probably a pretty busy man. And remember, later in the Bible, someone will say, well, isn't that Jesus, Joseph, the carpenter's son? So probably Jesus went along with his dad sometimes, carrying things, bringing tools, finding the right size rocks for the job. The next thing they needed, the next part of their life, was just their home, their shelter. Joseph would have built this against a hillside, so he didn't have to build that last wall. And because it was limestone, he could carve out places to put things, baskets and belongings into the back wall. Then he had to find the rocks to build up these side walls and put mortar between them. Their mortar wasn't concrete like ours. It was probably dirt and straw. But he would slowly chink together these walls so that they stayed together. And the very last thing, when everything seemed put together just so, was to put some wood into it. Timber was scarce. There weren't many trees in this area. Mostly it's just rocks. So the last thing they would do is put some timbers up top. Not many, but big hefty ones. And then build some more rocks on top. And then pack down some, put across a mat, and then pack down some dirt until finally the dirt was almost as hard as a well-worn path. Why did they do that? Well, there's a whole nother floor of their home then at night. And every night, probably the best part of the day was getting up on the roof. What kind of boy was this little Jesus? In my mind, he is so alive and so alert. He's the boy that finds the bug first. He's the boy that notices that a little tiny mustard seed grows into a gigantic bush. And he's so aware of his surroundings. When that woman touched the bottom of his robe, he felt it. His sense of touch is so strong. And his sense of taste, we know about this from all the fish fries that he's been partaking of. Food's important to Jesus. He listens well. And later when he's addressing crowds, he's listening to them at the same time that he's talking, so that he knows, are they listening? Are they quiet? Are they angry? Are their tummies rumbling because they're getting hungry? I think all of his senses worked at the top, as present as he could be, not concerned in the past, not in the future, but living in this moment as fully as he could feel it with the touches of life around him. So Jesus would spend a busy day working hard and just noticing life. That's exhausting, to be always full power looking around and noticing everything and soaking it in. And then at night, up he would go, up the little ladder, so that he could sleep up on the roof and rest. I think there's a lesson, a takeaway here for us in the life of this little boy. All day long, to be busy, to work hard, to notice everything, to be fully alive, and then at night, to rest, and to notice the spaces in between the stars, the spaces where God lives. All that love wrapping us in God's warmth every night. Tell us about life way back when. What was it like when it was then? Tell us about family life. Tell us about husband and wife. How to see the moon and the stars when they never stop where they are. Tell us about life way back when. Only God knows both now and then.